thanks to all of our attendees for being part of this. So let's go ahead and dive in to the discussion. And just for everybody that's on with us, usually we'll start a little general, have some discussions about, the what and the whys, and slowly get a little bit deeper into the technology that we're discussing. AWS Control Tower, what is it? Why should organizations be considering it?
Control Tower is really a guidance model and a governance model for you to help overlay on all your AWS accounts. It uses a number of AWS native tools and orchestrates the ability to control your users, what they have access to, how they access things, and just give you a centralized location to manage your organization and all of your sub-accounts inside of that.
We have organizations, right, which was one of our first attempts at an answer to a multi-account strategy. But Control Tower really just takes that to the next level.
And a customer will often start off with just that single account to go, and they'll dump everything inside of it. But as you go and develop, start to expand your infrastructure and start to adopt more of the well-architected framework, you're going to move into an organization structure along with having a lot of sub-accounts. So you end up with an environment where you're dealing with, depending on what your choice is, a lot of customers that we guide on this journey, we push for them to have an account per application or per business unit, having it be part of your SDLC, meaning that you're going to have a production account for your finance app. You're going to have a development account for your finance app to really keep that blast radius of your accounts as tight as you possibly can. So
yeah, I like that dev test production type, concept. That helps even the smallest organizations. Even those large enterprises that don't necessarily have dozens of applications and teams, and just managing, role access across all of them, shared services between all of them, managing the roles and all of that stuff. Control Tower takes a lot of that heavy lifting off of your plate. So if you are that two-person shop and you don't have the capacity to manage all of that overhead, Control Tower will give you defaults out of the box, which will work. It's definitely built on organizations. So, by default, you get the org structures that you're already familiar with, AWS organizations, that if you have multiple accounts, you probably are already using it. It leverages the service control policies, which is built into that, which allow you to set up guardrails around those accounts. So you could have an org unit with a set of policies that prevents, certain behavior within that org that's allowed in another org. And it could be access to certain types of instances and things like that. And in organizations that's available, and you have to manage it manually. And out of the box, you don't really have that turned on. But with Control Tower, out of the box, you get those guardrails, and you get two different types of guardrails. You get preventative guardrails and detective guardrails. And the difference between those two would be, with preventative, you're prevented from taking that action. And that could be something like having publicly accessible S3 buckets. That might be a rule that you implement. The other type of guardrail, the detective, are going to allow you to take that action, but they're going to give you an alert when that happens.
I know a lot of people understand landing zones, and now we've got Control Tower. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between Control Tower and landing zones that people may have in place today?
So the way I see it, if we want any security in cloud, so security by default, there are these two tools that we have in AWS these days. One is a landing zone, which is, think of the open source software. And the other one is a new Control Tower, which is kind of, it's like a branded out of open source. So landing zone is a service provided by AWS. It's the tool that ensures that there is a governance. It's a highly regulated security by default. From our experience, mostly SMEs, they tend to choose Control Tower because it's really templated, few buttons click on, and it's all done.
Where Control Tower is one implementation of landing zones that's managed and provided by AWS. And it uses those same services. If you don't have a lot of custom needs, and you want to just get going quick, and you're maybe a smaller shop, I think Control Tower is a great option to get started pretty quickly.
Part of the other couple big things that Control Tower kind of puts in as for data security or governance are your audit accounts and your logging accounts. So by default, when Control Tower launches and you launch accounts through Control Tower, it sets up CloudTrail logs and it sets up AWS config into all those regions and all those sub-accounts. And then it creates all the buckets and all the transfer of interconnecting between the accounts to move all of your log files into one account, and then to move all that config data to be able to be seen in one account, which is your audit. So it gives you a really central place to look at your entire AWS organization from like a governance and a compliance perspective. You don't have to be going into every single account to always be looking at all of your logs. Those logs get moved up into one place, and then that account can be restricted so that you're not allowing everyone from your organization in there. You can keep that to your auditors, you can keep that to very specific groups of people. So you start centralizing all of that kind of role and access management into Control Tower, or really into single sign-on from an organizational level. And then that just prevents you trying to manage users and roles across multiple accounts and quickly lose track of passwords and keys and everything else. So this really centralizes all that.
So when you bring AWS Security Hub and AWS Control Tower together, you can simplify the overall enablement compliance monitoring solution, as well as remove some of the operational burdens. So this is one of the aspects of the operational excellence within the well-architected and can be easily implemented with Control Tower integrating with AWS Security Hub.
By using Account Factory and Control Tower, you get much more in that better habit of when you want to do experimentation, you want to do new things, spin up new accounts. Keep all that separate from your production loads, from your standard testing and staging procedures. It just starts reinforcing better habits about how you should work with new technologies, or to do experimentation, or to test a new product or whatever, instead of trying to I'll just piggyback on production equipment to try to do this, and inevitably that never ends well.
So you have the concept of OUs as well inside of Control Tower, so you're not just stuck with these rules being forced across all of your accounts. You can have these guardrails being applied to certain guardrails being applied to certain subsets of your accounts. So really know how you want your application to look, and then stick with that pattern as best you possibly can. Obviously, things change. The nice thing about Control Tower, it is flexible, but nobody likes to go back and do duplicative work. Understanding what kind of access rights you want your users, the people that are actually going to be participating. Bring in an SSO provider, make sure that people aren't having to use root credentials to access the accounts, always a nice thing. Make sure that you're going in and defining roles and policies, thinking about those types of controls you want to put in place and rolling them out through Control Tower, through config, and pushing them down to your sub-accounts.
And I'd like to just plug well-architected, that framework, going through a well-architected review will uncover a lot of those things that you just brought up, and help you think through them. It's really hard for any of us to know all of those things and keep all of those things in our heads all the time. So that framework and the questions in the tool will help guide you through to make sure you're considering all that stuff.
AWS has released these conformance packs through AWS config that you can actually set up in an existing account that will basically apply guardrails, but not really apply guardrails, but will tell you if your account is going to get totally beat up by guardrails that go in place when you move it into Control Tower, or whether you're already good. It provides a central place to create roles, to create permission sets, and you can map those permission sets to, those groups with permission sets to different accounts across your organization. And then you no longer have to keep doing this every time you set up a new account. You don't have to keep setting up new roles. You can just say, yep, I want these groups to have permissions to these new accounts. I want to add these 3 groups to this account, or I want to add this account to these existing groups.
Every one of us on the call today really is representing, the partner ecosystem of AWS. Chris and Babu are representing, supporting Ingram We've got Harold that's Ingram that's kind of in the distribution model. Then obviously those of us from PTP as an advanced consulting partner and a life sciences competency organization. So we're all kind of built around, being able to take and leverage the AWS technologies, the services, the solutions, and help enable our customers to do more and better things faster. One
of the central features of Control Tower, which we didn't talk about much, is that service catalog. So the idea is that the pattern, these Control Towers base, you build out your architecture, and that could be anything from workspaces to a little bit of storage, backup solution, other third-party solution, and you build out one template of that, one product description. You deploy that into your service catalog, and then your other partners or customers can go into service catalog, browse those solutions, and launch that into the appropriate organizational unit. And then at that point, we'll have all the right guardrails applied.
They look for the, as Chris said, service catalog. It's a killer feature that people don't understand that, right? Coming from a small shop to the medium, they're still implementing the things and asking this type of questions that, how do we do, why do we need it? It's additional burden. If I can, all I want to do is log into the portal and fire up. So yes, you can do that, customize. Nobody is saying don't do that, as long as you follow the best practice. But if you want to do something like security by default, that has to be like from day one, a strong foundation. And these two tools exactly designed to do that.
I want to thank you, though, for your partnership and for the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects. So thanks for everybody.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate everybody for their participation. Great content for our attendees.